Welcome to Focus on the Candidates. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Sarah Batchu, and Sarah is running for the New York City Council in New York City, of course. So, what district are you running in?
I'm running in District 2, which includes everywhere from the Lower East Side all the way up to Murray Hill and from the East River to Greenwich Village.
What made you decide to run for office?
Well, thank you for having me on, Cynthia. I really appreciate it. It's always great to tell people a little bit more about your race and your story. You don't get as much attention in a city council race. But I got my start in politics working in city government. And I think, being a lifelong public servant and being somebody who's had the pleasure of working across city government and in the nonprofit world, I was really disheartened about a year and a half ago when our current mayor, Mayor Adams, announced some budget cuts to some pretty essential services across the city. And as somebody who's worked in this space, I knew that a lot of these cuts were going to be detrimental to my community. I was running a community center at that time in my district. And for me, it felt like I can't be on the sidelines at this moment. And I think that sense has really only grown since then. Now that, we've had the results of the general election, now that we see what's happening across the country, sitting on the sidelines is just not an option anymore. I felt like I have so much to give to my community. I have so much to contribute to my city. And at this moment, we need people who are ready to stand up to our mayor. We need people who are ready to stand up to our president. And that means, people in our party as Democrats across the country, obviously, support allies and other parties too, but we need to stand up and say what's happening in this country is not okay and that we're not going in the right direction. And so I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to be part of a movement of young people that's really stepping up.
What are the main issues that you're focusing on?
Our race is really centered around a few key issues, one of them being affordability. In New York City, we have an affordability crisis. It's primarily driven by the housing crisis and the lack of housing opportunities and options in New York City, and really honestly, across the country. Across the country, whether you want to rent or you want to own, it's often really hard to find something that's affordable, no matter what your income is. And so we need folks like me who are brave and ready to say we need to build more housing. There are parts of the city that have not contributed very much to the housing crisis and addressing the housing crisis. And so I'm somebody who's really prepared to support that in the city council. We also know that other big expenses for families and what's really pushing families out of New York City is are costs like childcare, for instance. And I'm a big believer and supporter in universal childcare. I was proud to work under Mayor de Blasio and part of the administration that brought universal pre-K to New York City. I think we need to continue that and grow that program down to younger ones. And I think the other big issue in my community, honestly, right now is safety. We feel a lot of folks in the city that the safety of our neighborhoods and our communities has really shifted since the pandemic. I would say a lot of that is due to the lack of investment in really the supports that keep people safe, whether that's job opportunities, whether that's healthcare services or mental health services. A lot of that has been gutted under Eric Adams. Again, that's what brought me into my race. And so, really having conversations with my neighbors about the fact that we haven't cut the police budget one bit, but we've cut all of these other holistic supports that really keep our city safe. And we need folks who recognize that through line and are ready to reinvest in those programs and keep all New Yorkers safe.
When you talk to people in your district, are they optimistic or pessimistic about the future?
I think there's a lot of people who across our country and certainly in my district feel a lot of despair right now. There are some folks, that I've knocked the doors of who really feel like this is a moment when they want to disengage. And what I've been most grateful to find and to learn in meeting my constituents is that they're not the majority. The majority of folks feel like they have to do something. They just don't know what it is that they have to do. And so reminding people that there's so many ways to stand up in this moment and fight for what we believe in. Running for office is how I've chosen to do it, but there's so many rallies and actions and opportunities to practice civil disobedience. There's folks who are obviously working through the court system to challenge what's happening in this country. And I'd say when you talk to people, most people want to change the direction of this country. They just don't know yet how.
And if you were to have this giant soapbox, what would you say how we can change the direction of the country? I think you're right.
Mhm. I think the biggest thing, that I talk to people about is, really investing in the next generation of leadership. And that doesn't just mean people like me who are stepping up and running for office, which obviously I think is really important, but it also means making sure that young people are heard and that their voice is valued and making sure that they are on the front lines and that we're not discounting them. I think a lot of times, especially around election season, you'll hear a lot of folks say that young people aren't involved enough. And I don't think that's true. I think they're involved in very different ways. And so for me, they're not our future, they're our present. And we need movements that bring them in a meaningful way. I've been really proud to build cross-generational coalitions my entire career and throughout my life. I think there's so much we have to learn from each other. And I'm honestly in awe of all the young people who have stepped up to say that they care about environmental and climate justice, that they care about economic justice and social justice. And we just need to find a way to really leverage that and utilize that in this moment.
I think having young people involved in politics is important. But from what you've observed, is the status quo, I'm going to use that phrase status quo kind of loosely, is it welcoming to the young people who want to get involved in politics, or are they happy with the way things are?
I feel like you're asking a leading question, Cynthia, but I'll say, look, the status quo remains the status quo for a reason. The people who are in power keep things the way that makes it best for them. And we know that young people are often not those in power. And so it's so important that we make sure that we have folks who are brave enough to say the status quo works for some people, but it doesn't work for us, and
Hmm.
really fight that. Inertia that I think and that momentum that really keeps things the way that they are and really challenge the people who are in the halls of power. Running for office again is one way to do it, but also being able to practice civil disobedience in the streets and to fight for what you believe in is another way to do it. And so all of those opportunities are core to how we meet the moment that we're living in right now.
What basically have you learned from your race for city council? What's the most important thing you've learned?
I think just humility, putting yourself out there over and over again is a really challenging thing. I'll say my generation is the generation that didn't like being on the phone and talking on the phone. I remember a lot of my early internships in politics were very phone centered, and I had to learn how to talk to people because it's something that I'll say, um, a lot of younger people are not used to doing that, offline in the real world space. And as I've, become part of public life, throughout my career, I've had to definitely like fight my own instincts to not really communicate and connect with people, and being able to do that through this campaign, really being able, particularly after the pandemic, to really build community again. It's been transformational, and you learn a lot of humility because you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And so
Mm.
sometimes you put yourself out there, you say, I think this issue is really important. And someone says, like, why are you talking about that? And you have to just remember we all come from different spaces, different places. Our feet are planted in different, on different ground. And I always just practice a lot of empathy in every conversation, even when I don't agree with somebody, just reminding myself what level at which I can find agreement with that person.
So would you say that a majority of younger people rely on social media more than they should?
I mean, should is a subjective word. I think there are a lot of people who are on the younger side who they spend a lot of time on social media, but there's a lot of good things that come out of social media. And I'm somebody who really only has grown up with it about half of my life. I've never been a big social media person myself, but movements can be built online and people can exchange information in a way that we've never been able to. Of course, it's been leveraged and utilized to bad ends in many cases, but there are also positive um, results to organizing online, and it's pretty impressive to see people build community in that space and really see that dynamic change. I've been lucky enough to see it change throughout my life and certainly throughout my work in government and politics. When I first started working in campaigns, I was working on Hillary's 2016 campaign. And I'll say, digital organizing on that campaign, which is what I was doing, is very different than what we're seeing right now. For instance, in the mayor's race in New York City, we have a candidate who has largely surged in recognition and popularity because of his social media presence. And I think that that's really exciting. It means that we can get really important information to young people and engage them in the process, but we have to know how to reach them. And so that's why it's so important to also have candidates that understand how social media works and don't discount it because it's real.
So you've been involved in campaigns for a while now. As you go along with your campaign, are there a lot of surprises, or do you not are you not surprised at what comes your way?
There's always moments of surprise on a campaign. You can't rely on things remaining the same pretty much ever. You're always got to be on your feet. I have been most surprised by the amount of people willing to connect and to really share what's on their mind. I had noticed because I started a community center just as we were coming out of the pandemic that when I was recruiting for that community center and really organizing the membership, I saw a lot of people in my community really be reticent to communicate and reticent to connect again. And so seeing, a few more years out since I launched that space, as I'm building yet another kind of proverbial space with my campaign, it's been really wonderful to see how many people have kind of welcomed those opportunities back into their life. Organizing in 2021, which was our last major city election, was really challenging because so many people were still isolating from each other, and it's been night and day to see what's happening now in 2025 2024 5. Sorry.
Are you having fun?
I am having lots of fun. I'm talking to you right now from a pizza parlor, which is actually where our campaign office is. We have located our office temporarily in a local and beloved pizza restaurant that has really struggled since the pandemic to kind of get as much foot traffic in the restaurant. And so they have a little slice shop next door, and we're in the restaurant side. And so we always have a little bit of pizza and politics happening in
That
the campaign.
that sounds like fun.
It
So
is.
I know you have to go to your next event in just a couple of minutes, but
Mhm.
if somebody wants to volunteer in these final days of the primary and reach out to you, how could they do so?
The best way to do so is on our website, which is sarahbachu.nyc, and we have all the information about my platform as well as volunteer opportunities and how to vote on that website.
Thank you, Sarah. I know you have to run, but it was a pleasure talking to you and good luck. Thank you. And thank you everybody for listening. So please, if you like this broadcast, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks. Good luck and we'll talk after the primary.
Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Have a good day.
You too.